The heavy silence in the dining room was thicker than the gravy on the roast beef. I sat at the head of the table, my fingers trembling as I gripped a crumpled piece of paper inside my pocket. Across from me, my husband, Mark, was laughing, clinking his wine glass against his mother's. He looked so relaxed, so confident, the picture of a proud father and a loyal husband. To family, his mother, Eleanor, announced with a triumphant smirk, and to finally knowing the truth. She looked at our 4-year-old son, Leo, who was quietly eating his mashed potatoes, completely unaware that his grandmother had spent the last 3 months calling him a mistake and a stranger's child. Mark leaned over and patted my hand. "See, Sarah, I told you the DNA test would fix everything. Now Mom knows Leo is a 100% match to me. We can finally be a real family again." The table erupted in murmurs of relief from my in-laws. They were all smiling at me now, but their smiles felt like knives. They didn't know that the official lab report Mark had just handed them was a fake. They didn't know that I had the real one. And they certainly didn't know that the truth wasn't just about who Leo's father was. It was about the dark, calculated lie Mark had been weaving since the day we got married. I stood up, my chair screeching against the hardwood floor. All eyes turned to me. "You're right, Mark," I said, my voice cold and steady. "The truth shocks everyone, and it's time everyone at this table finally hears it." Living in the Miller household felt like being a defendant in a trial that never ended. For the past year, Mark's family had turned our lives into a nightmare. It started with whispers at Sunday dinners, comments about how Leo didn't have the Miller nose, or how his hair was a shade darker than Mark's at that age. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, was the ringleader. She was a woman who valued blood purity and family legacy above all else. She had never liked me. I was just a small-town girl who didn't come from money. But once Leo was born, her dislike turned into a toxic suspicion. "He just doesn't look like us, Mark," she would say, loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. "Are you sure Sarah was focused on the marriage during that business trip to Chicago?" The injustice of it burned. I had been faithful to Mark for 7 years. I loved him with everything I had. But instead of defending me, Mark started to pull away. He became quiet. He started looking at Leo not with love, but with doubt. The tension reached a breaking point a month ago when Eleanor demanded a DNA test. She threatened to cut Mark out of the family inheritance, a massive estate worth millions, if he didn't prove Leo was his. Mark came home that night looking defeated. "We have to do it, Sarah, just to shut her up. It's just a swab. What's the big deal if you have nothing to hide?" "I would have to hide something if I was anyone but you," I had screamed. But I eventually gave in. I thought the test would be my salvation. I thought a piece of paper would give me my husband back and stop the bullying from his family. 2 days ago, Mark showed me the results. 99.9% match, it said. He cried, hugged me, and promised to make it up to me. He invited his whole family over for a celebration dinner to rub the results in his mother's face. But this afternoon, I found something in his gym bag that changed everything. It wasn't just a betrayal of my trust, it was a criminal conspiracy. Mark wasn't trying to prove Leo was his. He was trying to hide a truth that was so much worse than an affair. As I looked around the dinner table at these people who had treated me like a criminal, I realized I wasn't the one on trial anymore. Mark was. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand who we were. I met Mark in college. I was a scholarship student working 3 jobs, and he was the charming guy from a wealthy family who seemed to see the real me. He made me feel safe. My own childhood had been unstable. My father left when I was young, and my mother worked herself into an early grave. When Mark took me to the Miller estate for the first time, I was intimidated by the sprawling gardens and the cold marble hallways, but Mark squeezed my hand. "It's just a house, Sarah," he'd whispered. "You're the one who makes it a home." I believed him. I spent years trying to win over Eleanor. I baked her favorite lemon cakes, I remembered every birthday, and I sat through hours of her bragging about her ancestors. I thought that if I was perfect enough, they would eventually see me as one of them. When I got pregnant with Leo, I thought the war was over. I remember the day he was born, the smell of the hospital room, sterile and cold, and then the warmth of that tiny, shivering bundle in my arms. Mark cried when he held him. He looked like the happiest man on earth. "He's perfect," Mark had said. "He's a Miller." For the first 2 years, life was good. We lived in a house Mark's family owned, and Mark worked for his father's real estate company. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. I remember the sensory details of our best days. The smell of lavender in Leo's nursery, the way the morning sun hit the breakfast nook where Mark would read the news while I fed Leo. I felt like I had finally built the fortress of security I never had as a child. But Eleanor's influence was like a slow-moving poison. She started visiting more often, always bringing old family photos and comparing them to Leo. "Notice the ears, Mark," she'd say. "The Miller men always have attached earlobes. Leo's are detached. Strange, isn't it?" Mark would laugh it off at first, but I saw the seed being planted. He started spending more time at the office. He started checking my phone. The warmth in our home began to evaporate, replaced by a cold, prickly suspicion. I tried to fight it with love. I organized family outings, I bought Mark gifts, I tried to talk to him about his feelings, but he was becoming a stranger. He was becoming a Miller, cold, calculating, and obsessed with legacy. I didn't realize then that the legacy they were so worried about wasn't a family tree, it was a bank account, and I was just an obstacle in their way of their greed. The red flags didn't come in a wave, they leaked out like a cracked pipe. The first sign was the money. About 6 months ago, Mark told me we needed to tighten our belts. He said the real estate market was down and his father was cutting bonuses. But at the same time, I noticed Eleanor was wearing a new emerald necklace that cost more than our car. "If things are tight, why is your mom buying jewelry?" I asked. Mark snapped at me. "She has her own money, Sarah, don't be bitter. Maybe if you understood how business works, you wouldn't ask such stupid questions." It was the first time he had ever called me stupid. It felt like a slap. Then came the secret phone calls. Mark would go into the garage to talk to his father or his brother David. Whenever I walked in, he'd hang up immediately. "Just work stuff," he'd say, his eyes darting away. But the biggest warning sign was his behavior toward Leo. Mark stopped taking him to the park. He stopped reading him bedtime stories. One night, I found Mark standing in the doorway of Leo's room, just staring at him while he slept. "What are you doing?" I asked softly. "I'm just looking for me," he replied. "I'm looking for any part of me in that kid, and I just don't see it, Sarah. I just don't see it." "He's 4, Mark. He looks like my father," I replied, my heart breaking. "Exactly," Mark muttered before walking away. A week later, I found a brochure for a private DNA laboratory in the trash. When I confronted him, he lied. He said it was for a friend at work who was going through a messy divorce. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. If I didn't believe him, my whole world would fall apart. But then came the inheritance meeting. Eleanor called us over and told us that her husband's will had a specific clause. The main trust, the one that paid for our house and our lifestyle, would only transfer to Mark if he produced a biological heir of Miller blood. It's an old-fashioned will, I know, but my father-in-law was very strict about the bloodline. If Leo isn't a Miller, the money goes to the charity for wayward dogs. She smiled at me, a cruel, satisfied smile. She knew what she was doing. She was making my son's existence a financial liability. That was the night Mark stopped being my husband and started being a hunter. He became obsessed with the DNA test. He didn't want it for peace of mind. He wanted it for the $1 million, and he was willing to do anything to make sure that test said what it needed to say. The month leading up to the test was a blur of psychological warfare. Eleanor started sending me articles about paternity fraud and the legal consequences of deception. She was trying to break me, to make me confess to an affair that never happened. Mark was worse. He became a ghost in the house. He wouldn't eat with us. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "Just do the test, Sarah," he'd say every morning. "If you love me, you'll do it." I finally broke. I agreed to the test. We went to a clinic Mark chose. He insisted on handling all the paperwork. "I want to make sure it's done right so Mom can't complain about the chain of custody," he explained. I watched the nurse swab Leo's cheek. My poor son was so brave he didn't even cry. He just looked at me with those big brown eyes that Mark used to say were his favorite thing about me. After the test, Mark's mood changed overnight. He became loving again. He bought me flowers. He played with Leo. He told me he was so sorry for doubting me and that he was just stressed about the inheritance. I felt a sense of relief, but it was hollow. Something felt off. 2 days ago, the results arrived. Mark opened them in the living room while I held my breath. "It's a match," he shouted, lifting me up. 99.9%. "Take that, Eleanor." He showed me the paper. It looked official. It had the lab's logo, the signature of the doctor, and the magic numbers. We cried together. I thought the nightmare was over. But then, Mark did something strange. He insisted on keeping the original document in his gym bag. "I need to take it to the family lawyer tomorrow morning," he said. That afternoon, while Mark was in the shower, his gym bag fell over. A few papers spilled out. I went to pick them up, intending to put them back, when I saw a second envelope. It was from the same lab, but this one hadn't been opened. My heart started racing. I opened it. Inside was the real DNA report. I scanned the page, my eyes blurring with tears. I looked for the 99.9%. I didn't find it. Instead, I found the words, "probability of paternity, 0%. I froze. My lungs felt like they were collapsing. 0%? How was that possible? I had never cheated. I had never even looked at another man. Leo was my son. I gave birth to him. I knew he was mine. And then I saw the names on the report. The test wasn't comparing Leo to Mark. It was comparing Leo to a man named James Miller, Mark's deceased uncle. And then I looked at the other paper in the envelope, a second test. Subject A, Mark Miller, and Subject B, Leo Miller, 0% match. But then, the final blow, a third document, a medical record for Mark Miller from 5 years ago. It was a surgery report, a vasectomy. Mark had a vasectomy 2 years before we even met. He was sterile. He had known since the day I told him I was pregnant that the child couldn't be his. But instead of telling me, he had let me believe I was crazy. He had let his family tear me apart. He had let the world believe I was a liar. And then it hit me. If Mark was sterile and I hadn't cheated, how was Leo born? I looked at the fertility clinic records tucked in the back of the folder. 5 years ago, when we were struggling to conceive, Mark told me we should try hormone therapy. He gave me vitamin injections every night. He didn't give me vitamins. He had taken me to a clinic while I was under a mild sedative for a minor procedure I thought was for my endometriosis. He had used a donor, without my knowledge, without my consent. He had created an heir to get his hands on the family trust, and then he planned to use the DNA test to gaslight me into a divorce once the money was secured, making it look like I was the fraud. He hadn't just lied about the DNA, he had stolen my bodily autonomy to win a game of greed. I sat on the floor of the bedroom, the papers scattered around me like autumn leaves. I couldn't breathe. The man I loved, The man who tucked our son in every night was a monster. He hadn't just doubted Leo's paternity, he had orchestrated it. He knew Leo wasn't his biologically because he had chosen the donor himself. But he couldn't tell Eleanor that because the will required a biological heir. So he had faked the first report to satisfy the family, but he was keeping the real ones to use against me later. Why? Why keep the real ones? I found a sticky note on the back of the vasectomy report. It was in Mark's handwriting. Keep for custody battle, prove her infidelity, keep the house, keep the trust, she gets nothing. He was planning to take my son. He was going to use the 0% match to prove I was an unfit, lying mother in court, get full custody of the heir, who he would then raise with the inheritance, and kick me to the curb with 0 alimony. I felt a cold, sharp rage settle in my bones. I wasn't the scared little girl anymore. I called my best friend Chloe, who was a paralegal. I need you to come over, now. Bring a portable scanner. We spent 3 hours in the guest room while Mark was out for a run. We scanned every single page. We tracked down the fertility clinic. Sarah, Chloe whispered, her face pale as she read the files. This is medical battery. He drugged you and performed an insemination without your consent. This isn't just a divorce case. This is a criminal case. I don't want him in jail yet, I said, my voice sounding like gravel. I want him humiliated. I want the Millers to know that their precious bloodline is a lie built on a crime. What are you going to do? He wants a celebration dinner? I asked, looking at the invitation Eleanor had sent out. I'm going to give him a dinner he'll never forget. I contacted the lab that ran the DNA test. I spoke to the manager. I told them my husband had presented a forged document with their logo. They were furious. They agreed to send a certified representative to the dinner to verify the results. I spent the next 48 hours acting like the perfect, relieved wife. I kissed Mark. I laughed at his jokes. I even let Eleanor criticize my cooking one last time. The anticipation was a physical weight. I felt like a coiled spring. I watched Mark playing with Leo in the backyard. Leo was laughing, chasing a ball. Mark was smiling, but his eyes were dead. He was looking at a paycheck, not a son. Just 2 more days, I told myself. Just 2 more days until the truth comes home to roost. The day of the dinner arrived. The Miller estate was decorated with expensive white lilies, Eleanor's favorite. The air was filled with the smell of roasting meat and expensive perfume. Every second felt like an hour. I was upstairs getting ready when Mark walked in. He put his arms around my waist and looked at us in the mirror. You look beautiful, Sarah. Tonight is a new beginning for us. No more doubts, no more fighting. You're right, Mark. It is a new beginning. He didn't notice the coldness in my eyes. He was too busy admiring his own reflection. 4 hours to go. The guests started arriving. Mark's brother David and his wife Vanessa, the golden couple who always looked down on me. Mark's father, Arthur, the patriarch who only cared about the company's stock price. They all treated me with this disgusting charity. We're so glad you've been cleared, Sarah. It must have been so hard living with that secret. I didn't have a secret, Vanessa, I replied with a smile, but I've learned that some people have many. 2 hours to go. We sat down for dinner. The atmosphere was festive. Eleanor was in rare form, bragging about how the Miller legacy was now secure for another generation. I felt a buzz in my pocket, a text from Chloe. The lab rep is at the front gate. He's coming in now. My heart leapt. This was it. I looked at Leo. He was sitting in a high chair next to me, coloring on a napkin. He was the only innocent person in this room. I whispered in his ear, I love you, buddy. Everything is going to be okay. 1 hour to go. The main course was served. The wine was flowing. Mark stood up to give a toast. I want to thank my mother for her vigilance, he said, a smirk on his face, and I want to thank my wife for her patience. The DNA results are here on the table for everyone to see. Leo is a Miller, and tonight we celebrate the future. He raised his glass. Everyone cheered. Wait, I said, my voice cutting through the noise.
Before we drink, I think we should hear from our surprise guest."
The room went silent. Eleanor frowned. "Surprise guest? Sarah, what are you talking about?" The butler opened the dining room doors. A man in a dark suit walked in carrying a professional-looking briefcase. "My name is Mr. Henderson," the man said. "I'm the compliance director for Gene Tech Laboratories. I'm here because we received a report of document forgery involving our firm." Mark's wineglass stopped halfway to his mouth. His face didn't just go pale, it turned a ghostly, translucent white. "Forgery?" Arthur Miller barked. "What is the meaning of this?" "Mr. Henderson," I said, standing up, "my husband just showed the family a report from your lab. He claims it proves he is the biological father of our son. Is that document accurate?" Mr. Henderson walked to the table and picked up the paper Mark had laid out. He glanced at it for 2 seconds. "This is a fake," Henderson said clearly. "The case number on this paper belongs to a paternity test for a different family in another state. The data has been digitally altered." A collective gasp echoed through the room. Eleanor looked like she was about to have a heart attack. "Mark?" Arthur whispered. "What is he talking about?" "He's lying!" Mark shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Sarah, tell them! This guy is a fraud. I hired him to double-check." "No, Mark," I said, pulling the real reports from my pocket. "I'm the one who did the double-checking. You didn't just fake the DNA test. You faked our entire life." I threw the papers onto the center of the table. They landed in the middle of the roast beef. "There is the real report," I said, pointing. "Leo is not Mark's son, and he's not his son because Mark had a vasectomy 5 years ago." "A what?" Eleanor shrieked. "And here," I continued, my voice rising with every word, "are the records from the fertility clinic. Records that show Mark Miller drugged his wife and used an anonymous donor to create an heir, just so he wouldn't lose his inheritance. He committed a crime against me, and he lied to all of you." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the crickets outside seemed to stop chirping. I looked at Mark. He wasn't the proud father anymore. He was a small, broken man caught in a giant trap. You bitch," he whispered. "No, Mark," I said. "I'm the woman you underestimated. I'm the woman who actually cares about the truth." Eleanor was the first to react. She grabbed the vasectomy report, her hands shaking. She read it, her eyes widening. Then she looked at the fertility clinic documents. She turned to Mark, her face purple with rage. You used a stranger's blood? You brought a commoner's child into this house and told me he was a Miller?" She didn't care that Mark had drugged me. She didn't care about the crime. She only cared about the purity of the bloodline. "I did it for us, Mom!" Mark cried, his voice cracking. "The trust! We needed the money! Arthur was going to cut us off!" "You lied to me!" Arthur Miller roared, standing up and towering over his son. "You committed fraud against this family and this estate. You are no son of mine." "Wait!" Mark yelled, pointing at me. "She knew! She's in on it! She's trying to frame me so I can get a settlement." "I have the recordings, Mark," I said calmly. "I have the recording of the clinic manager confirming that you were the one who signed the consent forms while I was under sedation. I have the logs of the vitamins you gave me, which were actually sedatives." I turned to Arthur and Eleanor. "And as for the Miller bloodline, since Leo isn't a Miller and Mark is sterile, it looks like your precious inheritance is going to the dogs after all, just like the will said." The look on Eleanor's face was the most satisfying thing I had ever seen. Her world, her entire identity of superiority was crumbling. "Get out," Arthur whispered to Mark. "Dad, please!" "Get out," Arthur screamed. Mark looked around the room. No one moved. No one defended him.
Even his brother David looked at him with pure disgust, not because of the morality, but because Mark had been caught. Mark turned to me, his eyes full of hatred. "You've ruined everything." "No," I said, "I just stopped the clock. The game is over." At that moment, the police, who Chloe had called an hour earlier, entered the house. They didn't even need to ask questions. The evidence was all over the table. They handcuffed Mark in front of his entire family. As they led him away, he looked back at Leo. Leo started crying, scared by the noise. I picked up my son and held him tight. "Don't look, baby. It's okay. We're going home now." "This is your home, Sarah!" Eleanor shouted, her voice desperate. "We can fix this. We can keep Leo. He's a Miller in spirit. We can't lose the trust." I looked at her with pure pity. "He was never a Miller, Eleanor, and thank God for that. He's my son, and we are leaving."
The fallout was spectacular. The Miller real estate empire took a massive hit as the DNA fraud scandal hit the local news. Mark was charged with sexual assault under the medical battery statutes, document forgery, and grand larceny for the funds he had already taken from the trust under false pretenses. He's currently awaiting trial. His lawyers are trying to argue mental distress, but with the evidence I provided, he's looking at least 10 to 15 years in prison. Arthur Miller tried to sue me for defamation, but his own board of directors forced him to drop it to avoid more bad press. He ended up retiring in disgrace. Eleanor, she was the most broken of all. Without the Miller legacy to hide behind, she became a recluse. The grand estate was sold to cover the legal fees and the taxes that came due once the trust was invalidated. She's living in a small condo now, far away from the marble halls she loved. As for me, the legal battle was long and exhausting. Mark tried to fight for custody from jail, claiming I was unstable, but Chloe and a team of high-powered lawyers I hired, with the help of a small settlement I received from the fertility clinic for their negligence, shut him down. I was granted a full annulment of the marriage based on fraud. I changed my name back to my maiden name. I changed Leo's name, too. He's no longer Leo Miller. He's Leo Vance. We moved to a different city. I used the settlement money to start a small interior design business. It's not a mansion, and we don't have a butler, but every piece of furniture in our new house was chosen with love, not for status. The most important consequence was the peace. The trial was finally over. I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I didn't have to wonder if I was being watched or judged. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still wake up feeling the ghost of a needle in my arm. But then I hear Leo's soft breathing from the next room, and I remember that I saved him. I saved us. The Millers lost their money, their reputation, and their house, but I lost a monster and found myself. I think I got the better end of the deal. It's been a year since that dinner. Today, I'm sitting in our new backyard, watching Leo play in a plastic pool. The sun is warm on my shoulders, and the air smells like cut grass and summer. I'm not a Miller anymore. I'm just Sarah. I've learned a lot about blood and family. I used to think that being a Miller meant something. I used to think that the walls of that mansion protected us. But I realize now that family isn't about DNA or an inheritance clause in a dusty old will. Family is about the people who see you, who protect you, and who would never drug you just to fill a bank account. Leo looks up at me and smiles. He has my nose. He has my father's laugh. He is 100% mine, and that's all the purity I'll ever need. I've started dating again. Very slowly. A man named David, a different David, who works at the library. He doesn't have a trust fund, he doesn't have a legacy, but when he looks at Leo, he sees a little boy, not a biological heir. I'm still healing. There are days when the betrayal feels fresh, like a cut that hasn't quite closed.
but those days are becoming fewer and farther between. I look at the small gold locket I bought for myself. Inside isn't a picture of ancestors I never knew. It's a picture of Leo and me on the day we moved into our new house. We both look exhausted, messy, and absolutely radiant. I've realized that the truth didn't just shock everyone at dinner, it set me free. It took away the golden cage and gave me the open sky. I used to be afraid of the silence. Now I cherish it. It's the sound of a life that belongs to me. I am strong, I am smart, and I am finally, truly home. What would you do if you found out your entire life was a lie? If the person you trusted most was actually your greatest enemy? Betrayal within a family is a pain that's hard to describe. It shakes your foundation and makes you question your own reality. But my story is proof that you can fight back. You don't have to be a victim of someone else's greed. I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a toxic in-law who tried to ruin your marriage? Or have you ever discovered a secret that changed how you saw someone you loved? Share your experiences in the comments. Your stories of resilience might help someone else who is currently in the shadows. If you found this story powerful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. We share real-life stories of justice, courage, and the truth coming to light every week. Thank you for being part of my journey. Remember, your value isn't in your bloodline, it's in your heart and your courage. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.